that was in charge of the troops the British troops at Normandy. And when they stormed the beach, Lord Lovat, whose name was really Simon Fraser, talked to. Can you hear back there? Can you hear me any better? Can you hear me now? All right. So I was saying Lord Lovat's real name was Simon Fraser. And part of his contingent going ashore beside his infantry was his piper, Bill Nailey. And he had been with the regiment for a long time. And when the front of the Peter boats opened up and the troops ran in, Bill ran in and he was standing on the beach. And Lord Lovat went over to him and he says, "Hey, Bill, how about giving us a wee tune?" And Bill says, "Well, what would you like?" And Lovat said, "Well, I'd really like Road to the Isles, or maybe Bluebonnets Over the Border." And he said, "We can do that." He said, "But let me tell you something." He said, "There's a directive by the British government that there'll be no more pipers playing on the beach. The reason why is that the Germans had a bounty on them. They were given $500 for any piper that they could kill." So Bill said, "I don't mind." He says, "I'll play." And Lovat says, "Yeah, go ahead." So he started playing up and down the beach, and it excited the troops, and naturally they started moving inland looking for the Germans. At the end of the day, the troops had captured quite a few German officers. They took them back to interrogate them, and the one officer, British officer, said, "Well, you have this bounty on the pipers. Why didn't you shoot them?" And the German officer said, "No." He says, "Those guys are nuts." He said, "We're not going to shoot them." But the other thing is that during World War I, 1,000 pipers were killed in World War I. And when the war started, they would, when they blew the whistle to go over the top, the piper would climb up the ladder, get out front, and start playing, inciting, the troops. And the troops would just go crazy, rushing the Germans and all. But most of the time, the pipers were shot and killed. So they stopped that, and they made them play, but they had to stay inside the trench and walk along the bottom of the trench. So that's a story about the pipers. The pipers have been used in battle since at least 1000 AD. And even the Romans had them. Alexander the Great had them, a form of them. The Egyptians had a form of them. Now, they had a bag similar to this, one drone, and this is the chanter. This is where the notes come out of. They did not have a chanter like this. They had a bone, some kind of a bone that they would pick up and hollow out and make the different notes. And the Romans used these even when they invaded England. They used to use trumpets. The Romans would use trumpets for signals, like the cavalry used at Custer's Last Stand, things like that. But it got so loud when you have 50,000, Roman soldiers fighting, 50,000 Celts. It got so loud that they couldn't hear the trumpets. So what they did was they started using bagpipes. And the Romans are really credited with bringing the bagpipes to England. Any questions? Good. Thank you, Alan. Free fours, please. The first tune, and this real quick, the first tune in this set is called The Green Hills of Tyrol. And it's also called There Was a Soldier. a Scottish soldier that traveled far and near. All right. Quick, Mark. Next thing we're going to play is, we call it the jig thing. And it's called the jig thing because we were putting these tunes together to be different, you know, for the Kayleys, things like this. And we played some jigs in it that you'll hear. And somebody said, well, what are you going to call that thing? I said, I don't know. It's something like a jig thing, you know? So that became whatever.
Okay, thanks, Barney.
Is that better? Okay. There's a lot of stories on how the Highland dancing came about. And one of the oldest stories is that they would do this dance after a battle that they won, okay, and it was to celebrate, the victory. The other thing is that the clan chief wanted to see who his best soldiers were. And what they would do is they would put a shield down with a spike in the middle, and he would have the troops, the warriors, dance around this shield. And God help them if they stepped on the spike. You're out of the out of the front row of the army anyway.
They would spike into the ground.
Okay. And the other one. Let's see. It imitated a stag. If you watch her hands, there you go. It's to imitate the antlers on a stag. So we're going to do the Highland Fling for you right now. This next set is a 6/8 set, and the tunes are Albert McMullen and Bonnie Dundee. Now, Albert McMullen was written by a friend of mine as the first tune in their medley for the contest. Now, Al was president of the Eastern United States Pipe Band Association, pipe major of a couple bands, the Atlanta Band, and a judge. So the buddy of mine, Doug Ross, wrote this tune, and they played it in their medley. And who's judging? No, Albert. Okay, and he loved it. So I have to say they won that contest that day. But this is Albert McMullen and Bonnie Dundee. Thank you. The next dance that George is going to do is called the Chartreuse, which means old trousers. Now, what's interesting is the last battle fought on British soil was fought in April 1746 near Inverness, and it was at the battlefield of Culloden. Now, this was between the Scottish army and the English army. Now, everyone thinks that this battle was really fought between the English and the Scots, and that's not true. It seems that if you look who fought in this battle, the clans had a habit of, if there were two sons in the family, they would send one to fight on the Scottish side, one to fight on the English side. So whatever happened, they were going to win one way or another. The big thing is that there were other countries involved in this battle. France, Spain, and Italy all had interest in who would win this battle because naturally they would come in and try and take over. But it was fought on the morning of 1746, April. And on the Scottish side was a general, Murray, Lord Murray. And Murray told Bonnie Prince Charles Stuart, who was in charge of the Scottish army, don't fight the battle here. You cannot win that battle here. The Scots had to run across the field that had thistles everywhere, rocks, and it was going to be tough for them to run across that battlefield. And they had marched all night, and it rained that night, the night before the battle. All night long, hardly got any sleep, hardly had any food, while the English army was celebrating the Duke of Cumberland's birthday. And he had food and booze and everything for the troops, so they were well rested for that battle. So in the morning, the Scots had their pipers, and they came across that field. The whole battle lasted about 20 minutes, that's all. And it didn't last that long, and they did have some pipers. One piper, and I forget his name offhand, did walk across that field playing his pipes. He was blind, and he made it completely to the other side, to the English line, and they captured him, took him as a prisoner, and took him to Edinburgh, where he was tried, put on trial. And they got him for playing the bagpipes. And they said, well, the bagpipes are an instrument of war. And if you listen to those pipers, when those bagpipes start, they're like wild men. They just start yelling and screaming and running, and they're ferocious. But he made it across. He was tried and hung because he played the bagpipes, an instrument of war. And sometimes I wonder to this day why. I've played in many churches, but the Catholic Church will not let you play the bagpipes in the church. They said it's an instrument of war. So maybe they were on the jury. I don't know. I don't know. But anyway, there's a lot of history. After that battle, it was, I believe, 4 more years, the Scots were not allowed to wear the kilt. They were not allowed to carry any sidearms, swords, basket hilts, pistols, or anything. So what they did was they buried a lot of these things. And in 1785, it was repealed, and they started again wearing the kilt. Now this dance is a story about a fellow that just couldn't stand it anymore. He was wearing his old trousers, and if you watch what she does, she shakes her leg. That represents him trying to kick off the trousers. And after so many of the slow steps, she goes into a quicker step, and that's when she put the kilt back on, and she's happy. Now they were saying, what was the difference about the kilt then and now? Okay, well these are modern kilts. They're 8 yards worsted wool, different weights, and at the time of Culloden, the kilt was one big piece of material that wrapped around their waist and over their left shoulder. And that served as a blanket and things like that. Then they had in front, like we're wearing a black leather one's called a sporran. Now the sporran didn't look like that back in those days. It was a large leather bag, and they used to keep pistols in there, skeen doos. Some of those guys here have skeen doos, which means black dagger. They would keep those in it, and food, and your bank cards and your car keys, things like that. And that's anything like that. But that's the story on the chartreuse. It's really interesting too, because after the Battle of Culloden, the British government sent several Scottish regiments over here to fight the Indians and the French in the French and Indian War. And the Indians, if you read any accounts of that, were deathly afraid of these Scottish troops. They used to say they're crazy. And they go through the woods and they're playing a black swan, which was the bagpipe. So what they would do, if they would get into a firefight with them and they killed one of the Scottish soldiers, they would immediately cut off his head, put his head on his stomach, and cover it up with his plaid, this thing that goes over your shoulder. That way he couldn't get in. He didn't know his way around going to the happy hunting ground. But this is the chartreuse.
Thank you. I think Mark's going to be coming back in a few minutes. And we'll be back after Mark's school plays.
Yeah, we'll see what's going on up. We can move everybody in. All right, we're going to go back outside again, guys. So let's give a hand to the Seton Hill University Pipe Band. All right, so there'll be a little bit of a break. They're setting back up out there because we have bright sunshine again. It's a manic day today. It doesn't know what it wants to do. So we'll just have to deal with it. That's the cards we've been dealt. So we'll be going back outside for the banjos, and then we'll see what happens. The plan is for these guys to come back on one more time, and then we'll have a joint effort at the end there. So.